Can a fatty liver actually reverse? Proper reversal, not a bit better, not stable, actual documented improvement in the numbers. My liver enzymes, ALT, the main marker, was sitting at 69. That's 73 above the upper limit of normal. 20 months later, they were 10. That's an 86% drop. And the story of what happened in between is more complicated than I expected. I've got 13 years of NHS blood test data, so I can see the full picture here. When ALT was at its worst, at one point it was 173% of the upper limit. I was on statins. What happened after I stopped taking them, after changing the food, after the weight came off, all of that ran together. I can't cleanly tell you which lever moved most. I've tried. The data doesn't isolate it. What I can tell you is that the liver responded faster than I expected. And that number, ALT at 10, the lowest it's ever been in 13 years, was worth understanding properly. Benjamin Bickman, metabolic scientist, insulin resistance specialist, explains the hepatic recovery mechanism and what the research says about the relative contributions that goes in the body of this. But the numbers first. So here's what this covers. First, what ALT actually is, why it matters, and why the upper limit of normal is a wider range than most GPs discuss. Second, the 13-year dataset, what the numbers look like across the medication years, what the trajectory looked like after, and what I can and can't conclude from it. Third, the variables, because this was a multivariable change and I want to be honest about what the data can and can't tell us. And fourth, what this might mean if your GP has flagged your liver enzymes and you're trying to work out questions to ask next. As always, this is N=1. My body, my NHS records. Not a template, it's not a protocol. If you're on statins or dealing with a liver diagnosis, this is the conversation to take to your GP, not a reason to change anything on your own. What is ALT? Alanine aminotransferase, a protein that lives inside liver cells. When liver cells are damaged or under stress, they leak ALT into the bloodstream. So your blood test isn't measuring the liver itself, it's measuring how much the liver is complaining. The NHS reference range for ALT is up to 40. My April 2012 result was 37, just inside normal. My December 2023 result was 69, 73% above the ceiling. And the GP's note at the time, abnormal but expected. That phrase stayed with me. Expected for whom? And expected by whom? Here's where Benjamin Bickman comes in. He's spent his career researching insulin resistance, and one of the clearest things he's identified is its relationship to the liver. Specifically, insulin resistance is the strongest known predictor of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It increases the risk 15-fold, and NAFLD, which is the clinical term for fat accumulating where it shouldn't be, in the liver has gone from being virtually unheard of 30 years ago to affecting roughly 1 in 3 people in Western countries. That's not a small number. That's the workplace around you. So what's the mechanism? Why does insulin resistance sit upstream of a fatty liver? Think of it like an airing cupboard. You've got a big house, plenty of storage, wardrobes, chest of drawers, understairs. But when all the main storage is full, when you've run out of room in the obvious places, you start using the airing cupboard, the one that's not really meant for long-term storage. You start sticking things in there that don't belong. It gets warm, it gets crowded, it gets problematic. That's what happens to the liver when the primary fat storage systems are overloaded. The fat cells have their capacity, the glycogen stores are topped up, and excess energy has to go somewhere, so it goes to the liver, an organ built for processing fat, not storing it permanently. Fat accumulates in the hepatocytes, the liver cells. They get stressed. ALT leaks out. The number goes up. Insulin resistance accelerates this because when cells are no longer listening to insulin signals properly, the body keeps pumping out more insulin to compensate. Elevated insulin keeps fat locked in storage. Fat cells can't release it into circulation when insulin is high, so more incoming energy gets rerouted to ectopic storage sites. The airing cupboard fills up faster. Now here's the bit from a 2022 Nature magazine study published by Abraham Majinkum and Max Newdrop at the Amsterdam University Medical Centre that genuinely stopped me when I read it. They measured portal vein ethanol concentrations in people with and without fatty liver disease. The portal vein is the superhighway between your gut and your liver. And what they found was that gut bacteria in people with NAFLD were producing enough ethanol from fermenting carbohydrates to reach concentrations in the portal vein above the legal drip drive limit. The liver was clearing it before it reached the rest of the bloodstream. That's why sufferers had no intoxication symptoms, but the liver was doing the processing work constantly, silently, every day. Think of the liver as a Royal Mail sorting office. Everything that arrives from the gut comes through here first. Nutrients, hormones, and it turns out alcohol your own microbiome produced. A sorting office handles the traffic fine on a normal day, but when the gut is dysbiotic, when the microbiome has been disrupted by years of the wrong food, the sorting office starts receiving parcels it wasn't built to process at this volume. This throughput overwhelms the system. The cells doing the work get stressed and your alt rises. What this means for both entry points into this conversation, whether you've had a GP flag your enzymes or you're noticing something feels off before that conversation has happened, is this. The mechanism doesn't wait for a diagnosis. Fatty liver develops gradually, often over years, before it shows up as anything on a blood test. The people in that Amsterdam study didn't know their microbiome was generating alcohol. The liver was quietly dealing with it. Understanding the mechanisms at 40 or 45 gives you way more options than understanding it at 55. There's also a misconception worth clearing up. Most people, if they think about their liver at all, think about alcohol. Fatty liver equals drinking problems. But non-alcoholic fatty liver disease has nothing to do with drinking. The same process happens from excess fructose, from ultra-processed foods, from years of elevated insulin, keeping fat in the wrong place. Your liver can be under exactly the same kind of stress without a single unit of alcohol, just from the food environment most of us live in. That's not a niche problem. 1 in 3. That's the statistic. I wanted to understand what had happened to my alt numbers over 13 years, not just the final drop, the whole trajectory. April 2012, alt 37, just inside normal range. Fasting specimen, GP noted it, no action needed. Then the years on statins, December 2023, alt 69. That's the worst reading in the dataset. GP noted it as abnormal, but expected. What it means is that the reading was high enough to flag, but not high enough to warrant investigation, given the clinical picture. I was on statins, I was overweight, I had multiple metabolic issues running simultaneously. An elevated liver enzyme was, as far as the system was concerned, just part of the package. What I didn't know then and know now is that statins can raise alt in some people. The mechanism is being discussed with your GP, not a conclusion to draw from a YouTube video, but it's something worth knowing exists and worth asking about. Specifically, can you check my alt at the next blood test? Most GPs will do this without hesitation. March 2024, 1 month after stopping statins, changing to a non-UPF diet and starting the extended fasting work, alt was 28, down from 69 to 28, a 59% drop in a single month. Here's the honest version of what I can say about that. I don't know which lever moved it most. It could have been the statin sensation. There's a known connection in some patients. It could have been the weight coming off. There's a very strong connection between weight loss and alt reduction, particularly ectopic hepatic fat. It could have been the food change, the reduction in processed food, the gut microbiome starting to repair. It almost certainly was all of those things running together. Anyone who tells you they know which one did the most work is oversimplifying. The data doesn't isolate it. What the data does show is the November 2025 result, alt 10. That's 20 months into the transformation, the lowest reading in 13 years of NHS blood tests. A GP letter arrived in December 2025, day 66 of the 70-day rhythm reset, confirming the results. Optimal. Liver enzymes, optimal, off all risk lists. That 86% drop from 69 to 10, it didn't happen in a month. The first month gave a big signal, but the full story ran over 20 months. Month by month, the system settled. Here's the framing that made sense of it for me. There's a principle in medicine, simple, almost brutal, that disease progresses only when injury outpaces healing. So tally. Every day, the question is the damage coming in faster than the body can repair? If yes, the condition worsens. If the repair outpaces the damage, it improves. You don't need to reverse everything at once. You need to shift the balance, tip the scales the other way, and keep them tipped long enough. That's what 20 months looks like in a number. The first month was a big shift in the balance. The following 19 months were the compound interest. What I didn't expect was the liver enzymes. I wasn't targeting them. The HbA1c, the cholesterol, those were the headline numbers. ALT was on the panel because it was always on the panel. When it moved more than anything else. That's either the statin piece or the liver particular responsiveness to the metabolic change, or both, probably both. And the interesting thing about this mechanism, the connection between what goes into the gut and what happens in the liver, is that it shows up in data before it shows up in symptoms. I had a reading described as abnormal, but expected in 2012. That I barely registered. That number was telling a story about what was building. The 13 years of data make that visible in a way a single reading never could. 13 years of NHS blood tests, the actual numbers, the GP conversations, what changed and what didn't. If you want to follow someone who documents this properly rather than just talks about it, that's what this channel is. Subscribe if that's going to be useful to you. If I were starting this from scratch, knowing what I now know, specifically about the ALT piece, the one thing I'd have done earlier is ask my GP to include liver function tests in the annual blood panel and ask them to explain the trend, not just the single reading. ALT is on almost every standard liver functional panel. It costs nothing extra. The single reading isn't always useful. One elevated result doesn't tell you much, but the trend across years does. Abnormal, but expected in 2012 would have meant something different if someone had said, we'll watch this over time. We'll look at what moves it and what doesn't. If your liver enzymes have been flagged, here are the questions worth asking at the next GP appointment. Is this a one-off or has it been trending upwards? What's the likely driver? Is it worth investigating? Whether medication is contributing? What's the target range? Not just the upper limit. And can we retest in 3 months after I've made some food changes so we have a comparison point? On the food side, the clearest lever I can point to, the one I ran during the 70-day rhythm reset that I'm most confident contributed, was removing ultra-processed food from the majority of meals. Not perfect, not zero UPFs, but the majority. 2 meals a day made from real food, ingredients, recognisable, nothing that needed a list of additives to exist. The gut microbiome responds to this relatively quickly. The Magenta research suggests that what you feed the microbiome directly affects what it produces in the portal vein. Fewer refined carbohydrates left as a substrate for gut ethanol production. I also ran a 12-hour overnight fast as the floor. Not aggressive fasting, just not eating after 8 p.m. and not eating before 8 a.m. That gap matters. The gut needs time when it's not processing incoming food to repair the lining, to reset the bacterial populations, to do the housekeeping. You can't resurface a motorway while cars are still driving on it. Timeline for ALT, 3 months is the minimum for a meaningful retest. My 1 month result was unusually fast. Probably the statin contribution to the initial drop. If you're changing food inputs and running an overnight fasting window, 3 months is a reasonable check-in. 6 months is a more honest comparison. If you're on medication, statins, diabetes medication, anything that the GP put you on because of metabolic markers, this is the conversation to take to your GP before changing anything. Show them the questions, ask for the trend data. Don't make unilateral decisions about medication based on a YouTube video. That's not what this is. I track the 70-day rhythm reset in real time. Food, fasting, sleep, blood tests, all of it. If you want to follow what I actually ate, how I structured the eating windows and how the biomarkers moved through the process, that log is in the description. It's not a plan, it's documentation. Takes what's useful and leave what isn't. And as always, educational content only. It's not medical advice. If your GP has flagged your liver enzymes, your ALT, your liver function test, that's the conversation to have with them, not just the result, but the trend. Ask the questions, bring the data. If you're on statins or any cholesterol medication, this video is not a reason to change anything. It's a reason to have an informed conversation with your GP.